Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. Today's episode is One Piece, East Blue Saga, Syrup Village Arc, Episode 9, Honorable Liar, Captain Usopp. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. Luffy, Nami, and Zoro arrive at Syrup Village in hopes to procure a ship for their journey to the Grand Line, with the thought that potentially they may add additional crewmates as well. And when they get to the island, their first encounter is with Usopp, who Luffy does recognize as Yasopp's son, whom he had mentioned back when Luffy was a child and they had met. Usopp then basically shows them the village, treats them to a meal before hurrying off, and the crew, alongside his minions, follow him back to Kaya's house, where they decide, as lives in a large house and they were told that she has quite a bit of wealth, decide to ask her whether she could procure a ship for them. However, before they receive an answer, they are interrupted by Kuro, or Klahadore as he goes by at this point in the series. And there's where our episode ends. After rewatching the episode, we now are going to rank the episode on two lists, a mostly objective list, and then also the personal ranking list. So as always, we start with our mostly objective rank values, and because this is the first episode of an arc, we typically have a large number of character introductions in the first episode, and this one starts with our single arc supporting character introduction, which is Ninjin, P-Man, and Tamanegi. I count them as one because they are a trio that almost exclusively throughout the entire arc show up together all the time. There's maybe one or two instances that I can think of where they are separated, but it's incredibly rare, and because of that, I'm just going to count them as basically a unit character, and they are worth 1 point. I would like to honorably mention that Django is teased right at the end of the episode, but we have no interaction with the character. He's just seen on screen, and because that's just a teaser, I don't consider it the introduction, so he's not counting for this episode. Most likely he'll count for the next one. We then have our single arc main character introductions, which, single arc main character introductions, and we have Kaya, who is basically the one that they are going to need to save on the island. Spoilers. And Usopp's best friend, whom he tells stories to. And then we have her butler, slash the main villain of this arc, Klahadore, which is an alias for Kuro, his true name. And each of them are worth 2 points each, which brings us up to 5. We then have the main person we're introduced to, which is Usopp, who is a multi-arc main character, and, spoiler, will become part of Luffy's crew. Thank goodness we're rewatching because this is spoiler heavy. And that is worth 4 points. We also, now, typically when we first meet a character, I consider any of their baseline skills and personalities to be part of the introduction. And so they usually don't consider them to develop within the same episode they're introduced in. However, in this case, there is an exception because we have the fact revealed to us that Usopp is actually Yasopp's son, and Yasopp is one of the pirates on Shanks's crew that Luffy knew as a child. And so I feel like that is more than a baseline, and that is why it's going to count as character development in the episode, and that is another 4 points, which brings us up to a total so far of 13. out of 10. However, I do feel there are a couple of negatives to point out with this episode. First negative is the negative messaging or behavior. Now, Yasop, I don't think he's a bad character. Usopp, I don't feel is a bad character, but Yasop abandoned his child and his responsibilities to that child to go gallivant off as a pirate, not for any grand purpose or meaning, but through his own words, because the pirate flag called to him. It is my personal belief that if you are going to bring a small life into this world that you are responsible for, that you need to take responsibility for that child until they come of age and can then take care of themselves at a bare minimum. I think the fact that not only did he completely abandon his child, never to go and visit him again, but he brags about it openly, and then he goes around and tells everybody about this son that he abandoned like it was a good thing or that he loved his son. And it's like, if you loved him, you wouldn't have left him. And it's just kind of glossed over or almost positioned as if it's a good thing. And it's like, it's never a good thing to abandon your responsibilities as a parent to your child. It's actually very the opposite of a good thing, a bad thing. Now, to be fair, Usopp doesn't seem overly traumatized by this. In fact, he, on multiple occasions in the future, will claim to be proud of his father, which actually makes me pity him a bit because I'm like, did you not think that you deserve to have a father in your life? And that's why you're okay with the fact that he abandoned you? Like, if I was abandoned, I would be kind of resentful. Now, maybe I'm a worse person than Usopp, but I would be resentful. I would be angry. I would be like, I am on my revenge tour. I'm going to join Luffy's crew and go and get revenge on this father of mine that abandoned me. Not be like, oh my gosh, he's so great, isn't he? But Usopp is a fan of pirates. And to be fair to Yasop, when he left, his wife was still alive. Another spoiler. His wife was still alive, and so he probably did think that Usopp was going to have at least some support, but it's always better to be in a two-parent household. So very negative messaging and behavior, especially the way it's glossed over, especially as it's positioned as a good thing. I don't appreciate that. And that is a minus 2 points. The other negative. This one I'm going to explain a bit more. So I put a weak or dislikable supporting character. It's supporting character because usually it's supporting characters. It's really just a weak or dislikable character. And this excludes characters that are obviously meant to be disliked, such as Klahadore slash Kuro. I put this on here for Usopp. Now, in the future, I do like Usopp. I think he's a great character. He just has to grow on you. And at this point, he hasn't done that yet. Now, the difficulty with rewatching is that because I know the future and I know the character growth and I know that he does eventually grow on me and he does become one of my favorite characters in the future, I have a soft spot for him now rewatching. But when I think back to my first impression of the character, when I first started watching One Piece, I did not really like Usopp. I didn't really like his lying. I didn't really like his cowardice. I didn't really like his general being, the exaggerations, the overly large amount of pride that he couldn't really back up with actions at this point, the kind of insistence on wanting to be like a co-captain to Luffy when that wasn't going to happen. There was just a lot of things about the character that rubbed me the wrong way and didn't really like that. Where it first started to change for me is in the Arlong Park arc. His battle with Chu. It was amusing to me. And I started to appreciate him as kind of a comic relief character at that point. But he still wasn't really growing on me. He was there for comic relief, and I'm like, I accept that he's funny. We will go with that as his value to the crew. I didn't see much else. of value. Where it really started to change for me from like this is a comedic relief character there to be weak and make people laugh was during the Ennie's Lobby arc when he became Soge King. This is the point where I saw him in a different light and I was like, you know what? Actually, he's grown on me. I do like him after all. I think that's because at that point, that's when he kind of accepts he's never going to be the captain. They have like that falling out fight. Crew sides with Luffy. Then, he has like this, he has a character growth arc there. We'll talk more on it when we get there. That'll be years from now because there's a lot of episodes between now and then. But that's when he really started to grow for me. And then post time skip is when he became one of my favorite characters. And I feel like he really hits his stride post the time skip. So my conundrum was I know the future. I know right now, in my initial impressions, I didn't like this character. But in the future, I also know that I do really like the character. And I wasn't sure which version I should mark on, like for the ranking, whether I should say, because I know he grows, I'm not going to point out that I didn't like him at this point, or do I say, well, for the sake of accuracy, if this was the first time I was watching and I do not like the character at this point in the series, I should still put it on there. Obviously, because I am explaining all this, I did decide to mark based on how my initial impression of the character was when I first watched at this point in the series. Because the character growth and when I start liking the character isn't for several arcs, actually, even several sagas into the future, I do feel like I want to point out that at this point he was kind of dislikable as a character to me for the reasons that I had listed, and so I am counting it as a negative to the episode, which will be a -4. Which then brings this episode on our mostly objective ranking to a 7 out of 10 episode. So while this is the ninth episode overall, it is the first episode in the Syrup Village arc. As a result of that, it is the only episode so far, and therefore it falls into first place on our mostly objective ranking. Honorable Liar, Captain Usopp. Alright, so now we get to the point where it's the personal ranking, and there were moments in this episode that I really enjoyed. One of the things I like about these before the main action and bulk of the um, arc starts, it's kind of more like lighthearted times with the crew where you kind of get a little bit more interactions with the characters rather than fighting. I typically tend to really appreciate these kinds of episodes, and so I did enjoy the episode. Obviously, there were negatives as well, but some of the like highlight moments that I had, of course, was when they're on the ships. At this point, they have Nami on Buggy's ship, and then Zoro and Luffy are still on their little ship, and they're sailing side by side, and Luffy's getting excited about going to the Grand Line. Nami kind of steps in and goes, actually, we can't go there yet. We do not have a proper ship. We do not have equipment. We do not have enough people. We would die. And she then, while looking at her maps, notes that there is a nearby island that does have some people living on it, and they should go there, see if they can get a ship and other things. And of course, this is where Luffy then decides that yes, they should definitely go there. Not for the crew, not for the ship, but meat. He wants to eat meat. He loves meat. And right now he only has fruits to eat. And I understand. I too very much enjoy eating meat and would be very depressed if all I had available was fruit. I mean, fruits are better than vegetables, but meat is where it's at. So I understand that. But his priorities are kind of meat. Then he decides that they should get a cook and a musician. And then, acknowledges, yeah, maybe a ship too. But it's kind of out of order priorities, I find. So, anyways, they get to the island. And one of our little trio of vegetable kids One is named Onion, one is named Carrot, and one is named Bell Pepper in English, like when you translate it. And their hairstyles kind of show this as well, which I think is really, really smart character design. Or maybe not smart, but just amusing. I like that character design. Anyways, they Onion basically goes to Usopp and is like, actually, there are pirates. Because Usopp has a thing where he runs through the village every day crying wolf, or rather in this case, crying pirate, to the villagers who then come out and kind of run after him with their brooms and the pots and the pans because he's obviously causing disruption, though he thinks he is breathing a breath of excitement to the village. And so because he cries pirate all the time, they all think Onion is crying pirate, but Onion's like, nope, actually, really, there's pirates. Sail with a skull and crossbones, which of course is Buggy's ship. So they go there, they put up like all these little fake flags, and Usopp stands there and I was like, hey, I've got 80,000 men. And Nami's like, nope, you've got three. And he basically admits it and is like, I've been seen through. Meanwhile, Luffy was completely gullible, totally believed that there was like 80,000 people, thought it was like super cool. And then, of course, one of the good lines in this episode was when he said, curse you, you crafty technician, when he himself admitted that he was lying instead of continuing the bluff. Obviously, then he decides to act tough. He pulls out his slingshot, wants to shoot them. Luffy then decides to mimic a moment from his own flashback between Shanks and the mountain bandits about how if you pull your pistol, you're putting your life on the line and you need to be prepared to die, blah, blah, blah. Zoro plays along with this, knowing the story because Luffy had told him about Shanks when they were on their little two-man boat before Nami joined them. And Usopp kind of caves to the pressure of this line and their serious expressions, saying like, wow, the words of a real pirate just hit different. And he falls down. And then this is, of course, when Luffy admits that he stole the line from Shanks and says, you're Yasopp's son, aren't you? And Usopp is so shocked by this, he just falls right off the cliff and asks Luffy how he knows. And then we get a flashback of Yasopp showing off his shooting to Luffy, and then it changes to him in a bar with Luffy, telling Luffy about his son that he gleefully abandoned because the pirate flag in the sea were calling his name. I still don't buy that that is a valid excuse for abandoning your own child, but it's not my opinion that matters. And so, that basically warns Usopp up to them. You know my dad, you must be great. At least that's his thinking. So he takes them for food, and of course, Luffy's thrilled by this. He eats several plates worth. And they then talk to Usopp about how, we're in the market for a ship. We happen to see a mansion up the way there on the hill. Any chance you could introduce us to that person? And this is when Usopp freaks out and goes, nope, 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 gotta go, gotta go. I have to be zooming off. And he does so. He goes zooming off. This is, of course, when our Onion, Carrot, and Bell Pepper come in, and they had seen the pirates drag Usopp into the restaurant and decide they have to save him. And they come storming in, asking where their captain is, and Luffy's belly is extended from how much he has eaten. And they kind of freak out, thinking in their little minds, because they're small children, that Luffy might have eaten their captain. Because casual cannibalism is a very pirate thing to do. And so this is the part where Zoro decides, these kids are misunderstanding something. I'm gonna play along. And he puts on an evil smirk and he says, our captain ate him. And these kids freak out, but not at Zoro. They freak out at Nami, calling her Onibaba, or what it was translated in the subtitles as an old hag. And she, of course, is like, Why are you yelling at me? And she, of course, hits Zara over the head or bonks him off screen because, like, how dare you say this? Like, put them on the wrong path. Anyways, they then realize it was a joke and they lead them to Kaya's mansion where Usopp has been there telling her stories, and they explain to the crew how Usopp is a great guy, really good at lying, and he uses his power of lying to cheer up Kaya, who lost her parents a year ago to illness and has been in a deep depression since then, basically locked up in her room ill because of how hard the grief hit her. And this, of course, is when Luffy decides that he is going to rocket his way into the yard. And basically, when they see that he is about to do this, the rest of the crew and our little children trio panic and grab onto him, and they all fly way up into the sky and then all the way down and happen to land just perfectly right at the foot of Kaya's window and the base of the tree where Usopp is sitting, which is just outside her window. And then Usopp tries to say that they are new recruits that have heard of him that are going to be part of his crew. And Luffy stands up and is like, "Nope, not me. That's not the case. Actually, I was hoping you could do me a favor. Can you get me a ship?" But before Kaya can give any sort of answer to this, Klahadore comes over and is like, "Who are these hooligans that have broken into the yard?" And that is where that scene ends. And then we get teased right at the end with our Django walking backwards. Now, it's pretty clear the inspiration for the character, loose inspiration, but again, he's teased, he's not introduced, so that is where we end this episode. As mentioned, positives and negatives. There was a lot of comedy, there was a lot of new interactions, there was a lot of the over exaggerated emotions of anime that always bring a smile to one's face. I really enjoyed it, but then, like I said, there were negatives. Usopp, not a great character at this point. There's the, what was I gonna say? There's the casual okayness with child abandonment. These things, they are big negatives, honestly. So, because they're big negatives, even though it was majority positive, very amusing episode, made me laugh out loud, I really did like it. I still thought those negatives, they're pretty big, so I gave it a 5 out of 10. Figure averaging it out is the best call. And so, because it is the first episode within this arc, it is the only one on our list, and that is Honorable Liar, Captain Usopp. So now we come to our saga ranking so far, and this is where we're going to be ranking each of the arcs within the Ace Blue saga against each other. As a reminder of where we're at so far on the mostly objective ranking, we had Romance Dawn arc coming in at 86.67%, followed by the Orangetown arc at 76%, and then for the Syrup Village arc, we have currently a 7 out of 100. And once we have watched all of the episodes in the arc, we'll percentage it out to find out where it falls in the mix. And then on our personal side, we have the Orangetown arc in first place with 74%, followed by Romance Dawn arc at 66.67%, and then the Syrup Village arc is starting out with a 5 out of 100 so far. This now brings us to our last segment, which is the series ranking overall, which is where we're going to be ranking each of the sagas against each other. Now, I know it's complicated, but I do love to overcomplicate things, which is why we have so many lists here. And so far on the East Blue Saga, we've completed 2 arcs, and that has left us on the mostly objective ranking with a 16 out of 80, and then on the personal ranking with an 11 out of 80. So far. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked One Piece East Blue Saga, Syrup Village Arc, Episode 9, Honorable Liar, Captain Usopp. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.